All right, welcome to the Sports Idol Podcast. Today's guest is Rob Browning from St. Mary's College. I have a co-host today that is Addie, Hochschild Willis. I should know this better. You know, the three names always gets me. All right, so both today have had a stint with USA Volleyball. I'll let Rob and I'll let Addie tell you about Rob's background a little bit. So go ahead, Addie.
I'm very happy that you agreed to come and do the podcast. Thank you. I met Rob back in, I've known him for several years now. It doesn't seem like that long, though. It seems kind of like it was just a few years ago.
Right.
Realistically, it's 2023 now.
Yeah.
And I met you in 2002, 2003-ish.
Yeah.
When I was training on the women's national team, and he was on the men's side with the men at that program at that time. And he ended up going on to 4 Olympics after that. And we both ended up in the college scene somewhere. He went to St. Mary's, got hired on there, and took them to 5 NCAA appearances, 5 or 6 NCAA appearances, after a 2009 championship win for the West Coast Conference. So that's pretty awesome. I also think that it's awesome that after being a Division I coach myself, an assistant coach for 8 years at UC Davis, I respect the arena of that, and he's been able to produce 4 head coaches from being under his watch, and those people have gone on to be Division I head coaches, and that's pretty awesome. It means that those people are learning a lot, and they have good leadership, and I think that means a lot. So that's kind of a highlight for me about Rob. He's one of the head trainers and coaches for the Gold Medal Squared systems and does a lot of teaching on that. And Gold Medal Squared is a very successful, very popular, well-known program within volleyball, both on the men's side and the women's side. What else about Rob?
Well, the Beijing.
I think that's enough.
Yeah, is that enough? Have you heard enough about yourself?
I think that's enough. If you keep going, it's going to get really boring. So I think that's good.
Some career highlights. You've obviously been around volleyball for a long time. Distinguished coach. You want to tell me a little bit about, so you're at St. Mary's now, 18 years, Team USA, and kind of take me through how you got there.
Sure. Yeah. I think like most coaches, not a traditional path. I don't think there are a lot of athletes that when they're athletes say, I want to be a coach. I think they have other plans, for their career, and they end up going into coaching somehow. And that's kind of how it happened for me. My wife and I got married pretty young. We met at BYU, where I went to school, and we got married, and we moved to Washington, D.C. And this is my story, right? I told her, the way I got her to marry me is I said, I'm going to be an ambassador someday. And she said, oh, that's really cool. And so I kind of got her to marry me. And then about a year later, I came home and said, you know what, I'm just going to coach volleyball, and for not very much money. And it's kind of too late. You can't back out now, So anyway, we were in Washington, D.C., and we were working different jobs. I had so many different jobs out there, and Michelle had the really good job. She worked for Sallie Mae, the Student Loan Marketing Association, and I was working odd jobs here and there, and I started coaching, and I formed a boys volleyball club out in Fairfax, Virginia, and there are a couple other things that, got me interested in that, and had a discussion with a guy who was a former ambassador, Greg Newell. He was an ambassador in Sweden, and I met with him because I wanted to ask him questions about what do you need to do to be a diplomat and eventually be an ambassador and all that other good stuff. And he told me he was wonderful, took me out to lunch, gave me all these, really good things to help me set me up for that. But then he said, you need to find out what you need to do in life. I think he was inspired, actually. And he said, you need to know what it is, like what's your calling in life. And that really struck me. And so I thought about it a lot. And frankly, I prayed about it a lot. I just really considered that very seriously. And then I started sliding into coaching. And I formed this boys club. I did some other coaching. And I loved it. Just loved it. I just thought, this is really fun. I thought it played to some of my strengths. And so I did that for a while. And that was for sure a career highlight for me, working with those young men. And then we had our first daughter. She was born in Fairfax, Virginia, and we're both from California. So we said, we got to move back west. We're not going to stay out here. We don't have any family on the East Coast. So we moved west, and I called Carl McGowan. Carl's a very well-known coach, arguably the most influential coach in the United States in volleyball. You could even make an argument that he's one of the most influential coaches in the world for volleyball.
Carl, what was
His name's Carl McGowan.
McGowan?
Since deceased, passed away around 2016. I can't remember exactly when it was, but really influential coach, national team coach, collegiate coach, men, women. Anyway, I called him and I said, hey, I would like to, I'm looking for a job. We're moving back west, and do you have any positions? And he said, yeah, I've got this good position. It's called volunteer assistant coach. And I said, cool, I'll take it. And I did, and I moved our family with no paying job. I said, we're going, I want to do this. And so we went there, and I got a job at a private school, and I started coaching at BYU, and that's what really launched my career, because Carl is a really respected coach, and he helped me a lot. And the other coaches there at that time were Hugh McCutcheon, who's one of the most famous coaches in the world right now. He coached the women's team. He coached the men's team in Beijing that won a gold medal. And then he coached the women's team in London that won a silver medal. Then he coached at the University of Minnesota. Had a good, professional career himself and played collegiately at BYU. And the other assistant coach is a guy named Troy Tanner. And Troy Tanner was a gold medalist from 1988 in Korea. And he was big on the AVP. He was really one of the best players on the AVP for a long time. And so those coaches were there, and Carl McGowan, and I went, and it was just really fortunate for me that I got to work with that crew. And I was there for 3 seasons. We ended up winning a national championship there at BYU. And, what I tell people is they were garbage until I got there, and then all of a sudden, I turned them around. It's not true at all, but I like to tell people that. Won a national championship there, and Carl and another coach named Marv Dunphy put in a good word for me to Doug Beal, who was with the men's national team coach, and he was the coach of the 1984 gold medal team in Los Angeles, and he was coaching the team that was preparing for the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, and they needed a statistician, basically. They called it a technical coordinator. They needed a statistician, and so I was off doing a camp in the middle of Utah, a place called Vernal, Utah. Have you ever heard of it?
Never heard.
Yeah, that's how big it is. It's famous because they found a couple dinosaurs' bones or something like that around there. Anyway, Vernal, Utah, I was doing a volleyball camp there, and Doug Beal called, and it was the old days, right? Someone left a message, say, "Hey, Doug Beal called. He called the house where I was staying. I called him on a payphone." Josh, you're almost too young to know what a payphone is, but okay. Anyway, I called him back on a payphone, and he said, "Hey, I've got a job for you with the men's national team as statistician." And of course, I was actually looking very unsuccessfully for a collegiate job, and I said, "Yeah, I want to do it." And 2 weeks later, I was with the men's team in Japan, and so it was this huge. Being at BYU was really important for me, really a big step in my career. And then I got that opportunity to go with the men's national team. And of course, that was amazing. And I was with the men's national team for 6 years, and the Sydney Olympics and the Athens Olympics. Then I got the job at St. Mary's, which has been wonderful. And Hugh asked me to go with his team to London. So I went not in a coaching role, but in a kind of a team leader role, they called it. I got to be with that team when they won a gold medal in Beijing. And then I went back to St. Mary's, and the men's team got a new coach, Alan Knipe, and he had a whole new staff, and he wanted someone from the old staff to be with his team and be with the staff, to kind of just someone who knew, everything about the international game and traveling and the Olympics and everything. So I got to go with that team to London, and was amazing. And since London, I've been able to work with the women's team quite a bit in different capacities, as a practice coach with Pan Am Games team, some other age group teams. And here I am, 18 years later, I'm still at St. Mary's. And so it was not a traditional path. I was very, very fortunate. I think a lot of what I got, I didn't necessarily earn. I just had opportunities and I was in the right place at the right time, and I had these opportunities, and I went with them and worked hard, and just feel really fortunate that I had all those experiences. So that's kind of my career in a big nutshell.
Okay, so Addie, do you want to tell me a little bit about your background and kind of what has brought you to this point? I know you spent some time with Team USA. Obviously, that's where you met Rob, but go ahead and give us a background on your volleyball expertise.
So I played in born and raised in Sacramento and played high school 4 years there, and then got a scholarship to play at University of Pacific for John Dunning, who's also a volleyball legend. And my years there, he recruited me to be a middle.
Hold on a second. When you say also, you're not referring to me. John Dunning's a different level.
Also,
Yeah, no.
Rob, I would seriously argue, and you've done this all day in camp. You're in
John Dunning's
you're
in a
in the middle-
different
all the-
stratosphere.
No.
Okay.
I would disagree.
Go ahead.
I would strongly disagree. All the names that you just
Thank
dropped
you.
and being able
Yeah.
to hang out with
I'm
all
pretty
those
good at
guys,
name dropping. Yeah,
share brains with them, and I put you in the same category.
that's very generous of you.
John Dunning's and
John Dunning's, yeah,
Hugh
he's
McCutcheon's and
awesome.
all those guys. I played for John Dunning 4 years, and this was back in the 90s, from 94 to 98, when there was no libero position, and we still played side out scoring, and only the fifth game was rally scoring. So it was only the fifth. If you made it to the fifth game, then it was fast scoring to 15. But the rest of the game was spent back and forth, back and forth. You had to be serving to get points. So it made matches very long, and it made it that the DSs, if they were going to make substitutions, you would run out of subs pretty quick. So I was a 6 rotation middle. Meaning that I played in the front row, all 3 positions, and hit. And then instead of subbing out, I would rotate back and serve, and I became a primary passer, even from the front row. John was one of those guys that he expanded his mind so much that he would play to the strengths of his players. So even though having a passing middle when they're in the front row, back up and be in the serve-receive line was not normal, he was like, this works for us, so let's do it. So I have him to credit for training me as a passer and letting me kind of stay in there and develop my passing skills and defensive skills. So because I was a 6 rotation middle, I had lots of defensive experience at high levels and passing experience at high levels. And I did not get onto the national team the traditional way either. Everything about my playing career has been very unconventional, kind of like your coaching career. Typically, if you're being flagged for the U.S. national team, you're being flagged ahead of while you're in college, and you have opportunities to get into the pipeline pretty early. And I was on the junior national team as a junior in high school, but as far as the big girls team, I wasn't invited until 6 years after I graduated college. So I had been not playing, just playing professionally a little bit. They had invented this. Or made a professional league for the second effort, called the USPV, United States Professional Volleyball League. And that lasted for about 2 seasons or so. And then my coach was hired for Minnesota. I got drafted to the Minnesota team as a middle. And Kevin Hambley was the coach of that team. And Tore Alexanderson, I think that's how he says his last name. He was a Norwegian professional coach, and this was his first head coaching opportunity. So he and Kevin kind of battled it out together and co-head coached this team, and we ended up winning the first league championship for the Minnesota Chill. But it was him that introduced all of us to the USA techniques, because he was the assistant coach for the U.S. women's team at the time, alongside of Toshi Yoshida. And so he was bringing all of his USA knowledge to us and training us kind of the USA way. And we had a couple girls from the women's team. Wiz Bachman was one of those, who's actually Hugh's wife now. And Nicole Brana was on the women's team at the time training. And those two were on the Minnesota Chill. So we were using all the USA techniques. And I was training as a middle, hoping to get a middle spot. And the other middles were pretty big, pretty fast. And we were all kind of comparable, but I was just slightly smaller than them. So he tried to, convert me into a middle after converted me into a libero after seeing me play libero with the first professional team I played on. Ari Selinger actually coached that team with the USPV, and he's the one that when the libero position was invented in 2000, he recognized my all-around skills, and when I broke a bone in my foot and couldn't jump for this big tournament, he went, let's put the libero jersey on her because she can pass, and says she can't do anything else, and we need her on the court. That'll give her an opportunity to play. And I was like, yes, I will take any opportunity to play that I can get. I will do whatever you want me to do. I can pass. I'll do it. So I put the jersey on me, and it was amazing. I did miss hitting, but that's how I ended up getting onto the national team, because I developed as a libero. And Kevin brought me on to the national team because he was the assistant coach at the time. So that's when I entered the gym and met Rob. Rob was with the men's team at the time, and that was training for 2004. And Rob obviously went on and went to the Olympics. I was cut, unfortunately, about 6 or 8 months prior to the Olympics, but the experience itself was just, I think my purpose in life is to coach in some capacity, and I think that being part of the national team and seeing that level and seeing the training and being part of that elite circle kind of raised the bar for me to go on and be a better coach.
Yeah, you have to love volleyball, right, to be playing it 6 years after. Is that 6 years after college, you said?
Yeah, there was a pretty big break in between professional seasons, and then it usually you get flagged right away. You go from college right to the national team, or even while you're still in college, you're kind of training on like a junior team, and I didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, Addie's story is pretty phenomenal. To go from being a middle to being a libero, I'm not even sure how to compare it. Like going from being a first baseman to a pitcher, or going from being an offensive lineman to being the quarterback or something like that. Those two positions are the opposite of each other. The middle traditionally is, we're not going to let you touch the ball except to hit and block. And the libero is, you can't hit and block, so we're going to have you back here. And so pretty amazing that you did that. And great foresight from your coaches that Ari saw that, Kevin saw that, and continued to see it. That's really cool. And I just, you say you didn't make the Olympics, and I did. Of course, my going to the Olympics, I was allowed to tag along. That's basically, it was like, hey, you can come too. I was not an athlete. That's a totally different thing. An Olympian is an athlete. I went to the Olympics. An Olympian is an athlete. Being considered for the Olympics like you were, like being in the running to go, that's amazing. I don't know what the percentages of athletes get to that level in whatever sport they're in, but it's an extremely small percentage, and
It's
Addie
a
was
decimal.
there.
Yeah,
It's a
I'm
decimal
sure.
for sure.
Yeah,
There's no
I'm
question
sure.
about it.
Well, at that level, to the coach's credit, yes, the athletes have a different experience than the coaches. However, I would argue that with the athleticism of each athlete, we can only get so far by ourselves, and then we need to have brains behind the scenes working all the little details out and giving us the scouting reports and giving us statistics and telling us, because at that point, at that level, it's a matter of like a fraction of a percentage of an angle that makes a pass better. And we can't always, we can feel it sometimes, but we can't always know what it is that's going wrong. So we need the people like Rob. So Rob discredits himself by saying, I just got to tag along. BS, dude. You were picked for your brains because you know a lot about all that stuff, and they took you because you could help them win. And it takes it takes everybody at that level, every single person at that level. And the analogy that I like to use, though, to your thing about going from a middle to a libero is because Peyton Manning's my favorite player on the planet. I love him. It would be like, a guy that looks like a quarterback is, has the stature, and they're like, dude, you are the best quarterback in the country right now. But for the Super Bowl, you're going to trade positions and you're going to be the receiver. We don't want you to throw it anymore. We want you to catch it.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the guy is better at catching.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a surprise to all of us. Like, well, she's a pretty good middle, and maybe on Olympic level middle. But what I know about hitting and what the hitter's tendencies are, I could pick up as a libero. And I was like, I know what she's trying to do.
And you're 6'1"? 6'1".
Literally the tallest libero in the world at the time. And
That's what I was about to ask you, because when I hear libero, so libero, I was around volleyball a little bit when I was younger, but it wasn't a position.
it was.
Yeah.
And then, as my daughter got into it, I started getting back in volleyball. I was like, what is that? Like, what? I don't remember this position. And so, and then the rally score and everything had kind of changed because I played a little bit in the 90s, so like the mid to late 90s, right?
Okay.
Right before I went in the Army. And so, so defensive specialist, tell me a little bit about how that position, because I'm actually curious of like, how did this position come about? What are the rules with it? You guys want to talk to me a little bit about it, about libero? Yeah.
Well, I think the libero position came about because of the substitution thing. Libero in Italian means free, so it's a free sub. She can go in and out of the game freely without having to call a substitution. They track her on a special sheet, but she wears a different color jersey than everybody else so that we can see when she's going in and out. So some of the rules, the libero can't set overhand to an attacker from in front of the 10-foot line. She can set from behind the 10-foot line, but if she's in front of the 10-foot line, you have to bump set. Sometimes they can serve. Can they?
You know, it's interesting. Women's collegiate volleyball is its own like entity. They have their own rules. Women's collegiate volleyball, maybe, I don't even know, in USA volleyball and junior volleyball, can the libero serve? Okay.
In club they can.
Okay, in club they can, but those are the only places in the world where the libero can serve.
Oh, so libero can't serve.
In men's collegiate volleyball, they cannot serve. In international volleyball, they cannot serve. In any league around the world, maybe except for really young kids, the libero can't serve.
What about high school?
High school they can serve.
They can serve
in high
What about
school.
boys' high school? Okay, they can.
Yep.
Oh,
That's good. That's good that they
really
allow them to do
interesting.
that. But
The rules haven't synced up yet.
right. Well, yeah.
Across
They
the
have everywhere in the world except for
Except
here.
here.
So one of the, they created that. I thought it was kind of genius that they created it, and I thought it was good foresight to create that, because there were these really good volleyball players who weren't getting a chance to play because they weren't tall, basically. And so they created a position where someone could have an impact on the game. Smaller players who were really good could play. But then they made some rules so that you couldn't take advantage of that position to insert a setter or a dominant server. They really wanted to protect the position for smaller players. Otherwise, like in men's volleyball, they would just get some guy who's a bomb server and say, you're going in and serving for this player, then you're going to go in and serve for that player, or whatever. You're going to go in and serve, or you're going to go in and set. You're going to be a setter. And so they made it so that it was really a serve-receive and a digging position primarily.
So the libero can't set the ball?
Not with their hands in front of the 10-foot line, as you said.
From behind the 10-foot line.
Okay.
So they can from behind the 10-foot line. Yeah.
You do end up actually setting overhand from in front of the 10-foot line closer to the net. The hitter has to stay on the ground.
Yeah.
So they can't attack above the plane.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And I'll add that typically, because the libero or the DS is generally the smaller person that has better ball control, they usually go in for a middle, because middles, for some reason, are typecast as players that aren't trained to be very good passers. I'm sure the players in Rob's gym right now at St. Mary's, I just watched all his players. They were pretty good.
Yeah.
I was like, I might leave her in.
What's your typical size now of a libero? What do you see it at the college level?
Just smaller.
Smaller?
Yeah, it's still smaller.
All right.
Almost all of them are smaller. Occasionally you'll find one, at the international level who maybe for one reason or another haven't been able to make it that far as an attacker, but they're a really good passer, digger, and they were formerly an outside hitter. And so they might be that way. Rich Lamborn was, just as an example, actually two examples. Rich Lamborn on the BYU team that won a national championship was an outside hitter, and he was really good. But he was never going to be a dominant, outside hitter at the international level, because he was only 6'3" or something. He was relatively small, 6'2", 6'3", something like that. So he went to the national team and became libero. And Eric Sullivan was an outside hitter at UCLA, and he was really good. But his future, long-term future was as a libero, and so he became a libero. And then Addie and I also both know that there's a bunch of people listening right now that are saying, I thought it was libero or libero. I think I even said libero a couple times there.
Yeah, you did.
We both say
Very
libero
natural.
because that's, at the international game, that's how they refer to it, because it is an Italian term, libero.
Yep.
But in America, it's morphed into libero, and so both are okay.
It was hilarious because when I was watching the national championship this year, Texas won the national championship, and the commentators were caught saying Libero, and all the comments when I was watching it on Facebook and the threads, they were like, "What's a Libero?" Oh, libero. That's right. Okay, same position.
I gotcha. All right, so Rob, you were talking about statistician, about being a statistician, and so what is that? And can you kind of you mentioned it's almost like an entry level, but can you tell me a little bit about the hierarchy of coaching?
Sure.
Yeah, tell me a little bit.
So when I went to BYU, Carl McGowan said, I've got this wonderful position called volunteer assistant, and so I was a young coach. I was with Carl McGowan, Hugh McCutcheon, and Troy Tanner. So I was best off doing a lot of observing and trying to learn a lot. And what Carl had me do, though, was take some stats during matches. And so I started doing that and learned a lot about it. And I created my own stat sheet and used this 4-color pen. And I figured out how, with pen and paper, because there were not laptops and there were no handheld devices, so it was pen and paper. I figured out how to keep track of a lot of statistics with pen and paper, using different colors and a certain layout and different symbols that I would use. So I did that and really enjoyed it. It helped me learn a lot about the game. And so then when Doug Beal with the men's national team needed a statistician, Carl, and again, Marv, I did some camps for Marv, and they said, hey, you should look at this kid, Rob Browning. He can maybe help you. So I went to the men's national team as a statistician, technical coordinator, they called it. The funny thing is, so the guy who was there before, his name was Daryl Akimoto. He was a genius. In fact, I think he left the job to take a job with the military tracking missiles, using formulas and computers and things to track missile trajectories. Way smarter than I was. So it was a big step down when I went in. It really was. I did not know how to use it. I barely knew how to use a computer. Did not have a mathematical statistical mind at all. But I learned. I learned. Monica Paul was with the women's national team. She was really good about helping me learn this new program called Data Volley. It was a really young, brand new thing. And basically it was the first laptop-oriented statistical program where you could type in a bunch of codes and come up with a ton of statistics, and then it could sync with video. It was really revolutionary, actually. So I did that, and that was my job. And so I learned, and I only learned what I needed to do. If you came up to me and said, hey, I've got a question about, computers or something, I'd say, sorry, I don't know anything about computers except how to run Data Volley. That's what I know. So I did that with the men's national team, and that's what I did. I kept stats and took care of the video and got to sit in all these great coaches meetings, and occasionally had some ideas about, well, what about this with this player or that? But I was pretty much just a statistician. And it was an important job. It really is. Volleyball is very statistically oriented. It's a very random, unpredictable, kind of a chaotic game, and you make sense of it through statistics. It's similar to baseball in that regard. When the ball goes off the bat, it's a very random thing. And to be able to track who's doing well and who's good and who's not and who's playing well, what statistics are important, you need to keep a bunch of stats like, baseball has forever. So anyway, volleyball is similar in that way. And I was very fortunate to be there at that time when brand new technology was being used. And I was kind of at the forefront of that just because I was in that place at that time.
What kind of statistics were you keeping track of, and how, like looking back on it, how did you use those to evaluate players, or what opened your eyes about tracking stats?
Well, when I was with BYU, I was keeping track of serving, passing, attacking, blocking, primarily that. And I figured out a way how to do it by rotation also, which is important in volleyball. keeping track of statistics by rotation, because you have you're constrained to certain formations because of the rules, overlapping rules in volleyball. And because you're constrained, there are patterns that start to emerge with teams. Well, when this player is left front and this middle is middle front, or this player is passing here, or the setter's coming from this entry point, this is what they like to do, because when this big hitter's in the back row, they can't set them as much anymore. When the setter's in the front row, things change. And so you track things by rotation. So I learned how to do that. And then with this program, Data Volley, you could just basically anything you could type in. If you could type fast enough, you could get more statistics. And so I got pretty good at typing. I took typing in high school.
You would have to do typing to do data volley, because it's its own full-time job. They hire people just to do data volley on the bench. That's their sole purpose in life, is data volley. It's intense. It's
Now,
very,
was this the program that was like essentially, it was as the play is going, you're describing the play through these data entries, like the entire match?
It's like commentating on the keyboard.
Pass from here to set to here, or this hitter hits, this is the result of the hit, this is the result of the set, whatever the...
Yeah.
Wow.
These guys in Italy, Emilio Spirito and his team over there, Johnny, and these really smart guys in Italy developed this program where you could use these codes, and these codes would tell you a lot. Like you could just put in a couple letters, and it would tell you a bunch of information. Put a jersey number, a couple letters, and a symbol, and it tells you that this person passed, and then this person attacked, and they got a kill. And they hit it on the left side of the net, and they hit it to this place over there, So they figured out how to do all these shortcuts, kind of shorthand on the keyboard. Really ingenious, actually.
It was, but it did look like Greek on paper sometimes. Like if you read it on a sheet, if you were to print it out, you just see the codes, and you're like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, they were nerds. And I was one of them. Yeah, it was. We all need
nerds. We love nerds. Nerds are very popular.
Yeah, it's funny because I was a nerd, but I was not this really ingenious or genius nerd. I was just this common guy who learned how to do this one thing, and so I thought it was pretty cool being a nerd for a while.
It's valuable.
Did that kind of propel your career, just doing the statistics and
I think that helped me a lot. But the thing that propelled my career more than anything else is I was extremely fortunate to fall into these groups of coaches: Carl McGowan, Hugh McCutcheon, Troy Tanner, Doug Beal, Marv Dunphy, Rod Wild, and on and on and on. And I got to be around these coaches and learn from them. And so the moment I got to BYU, all the way through all the national team staff, I got to be around these great coaches. Kevin Hambley. Kevin was an assistant. Toshi Yoshida, great coach. They were with the women's team at that time, and I got to be kind of close with Kevin. And so I got to learn all these different things. So that, more than anything else, I was really fortunate to be around a bunch of amazing coaches. The kind of coaches that people pay a lot of money to hear speak, and I got to just sit in the room with them. I was in the room with these guys
incredibly valuable
for years, and I'm not a fast learner, but I was with them long enough that I got to learn a lot, and it was great. That more than anything else, I think, helped me. And then I had a desire. I really enjoyed coaching, wanted to coach, enjoyed teaching. John Kessel, another person I got to spend a bunch of time with, Bill Neville, these legendary coaches, really legendary. And so I got to learn, for a long period of time.
These are huge names that he's saying, by the way. And I hope that their legacy can continue because half of the people that we're kind of talking to are the younger kids. Some of them don't know even who's on our national team now. So that's kind of, to me, what secures your legendary status, because as they continue to drop off, like Hugh went into administration,
right?
Doug's retired, like they're all kind of going, Marv retired, they're passing, they're moving on. And here you are with all of them and a little piece of you intermixed into one brain out there, keeping their legacy alive and keeping volleyball the way that it was, back then, at least a little bit, the important parts.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge value. So I hope that the young people listening and the families listening will Google all of these names that he just mentioned, and find out a little bit more about them.
Yeah. And so, Karch Karai, I've been able to spend since 2012. I mean, I've been able to learn from Karch, who's his name is probably the most famous name in volleyball of all time. And I would argue it's hard to say that he's as good a coach as he was a player, because he was the best player in the world, but he is a really good coach. He transitioned from being the best player in the world and coaching his boys a little bit to Hugh hired him to be with the women's national team, and then being the head coach there. He's amazing. He's really good. I got to be with, so Karch is on the young end. Jim Coleman was probably the oldest guy that I got to spend time with. He was a coach in the 60s for the national team. And when I joined Doug, I got to be with Jim Coleman. And so I'll give you that, Addie, for sure. That bridge,
Yeah.
I am so grateful for that opportunity to I had to be with all of those people, from Jim Coleman all the way up to, Karch. Pretty cool for me. I mean, for me, it's just an amazing thing. I got to do that.
Yeah. Wow. So looking back at your career trajectory, what would you say is the most defining season? You're at your 19th season going into St. Mary's.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had this experience when you were young. You get the head coaching job. Now you've been there for a while. What is kind of a season that stands out to you at St. Mary's? At St. Mary's,
there are lots. The easiest one for me to say at St. Mary's would be the 2009 season. My assistant coaches were Sam Crossan. Learned a ton from Sam. I went from men's volleyball to women's volleyball, and there are a lot of things I didn't understand about women's volleyball. I hired Sam Crossan. That was the best hire I could have made, because he helped me transition from men's to women. He taught me stuff like, he said, hey, we need to teach a slide attack. And I said, what is that? I mean, I knew what it was, but I didn't know how to teach it. Men don't do a slide attack. And so things like that.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, there's a reason for that. And it's because men can be really dominant attackers from the back row. And so when you're setters in the front row in men's volleyball, they can set one or two of their back row attackers and balance the net, meaning they can have attack on the left in the front row and on the right in the back row, and keep their middle hitting in the middle. Women have not been as dominant as attackers. They're not as dominant attacking from the back row, and so they figured out a way to balance the net by sending a woman on a slide. So you have an attack on the left and a front row attack on the right, and so it makes it harder on the middle blocker. If you just kept a middle in the middle and attack on the left and didn't have a strong back row attack, it'd be easier for the blockers to gang up basically on the hitters. So that's what I think. That's the primary reason why women attack off one foot behind the setter like that and men don't, because men don't need to, because they can set what we call a D, a right side of the net from the back row, and it can be very effective.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Are there other differences, significant differences between men's and women's volleyball?
It's one of the big ones. It's jump serving, like jump spike serving, where they're hitting the ball. That's a big one. Most men do that, and they can hit it hard enough to be really effective. And more women are doing it, and more women are attacking out of the back row, and it's amazing. Like, you watch our women's national team right now, and they're hitting Bics, and they're hitting Cs, and they're hitting Ds, and they can be really effective with it. It wasn't that long ago that people didn't think you could do that, and women are proving that you can, and that they're fully capable of doing that.
Well, it's partly training too. Like we weren't as physical. If you watch, footage of volleyball back when it was invented, they looked physically very different than we did in the 90s. And I look back on our footage in the 90s and look and go, man, they look so much more physical now than even I did in the 90s. So the training has gotten better, more advanced, and you're right, women are coming into a headspace where we think we can do it. And so that, combined with the training, it's looking a lot more physical. on the women's side. So you are seeing more back row attacks and more dynamic plays, more blocking.
Yeah. Yeah. When I got to St. Mary's, the coach before me at St. Mary's was a guy named John Stevenson. He was a really good volleyball coach, and did well with his teams were successful. They won a lot. So St. Mary's started swing blocking. And when I got to St. Mary's, they were swing blocking. They were the only team in the West Coast Conference that was swing blocking, and one of the few teams in the country that was actually doing it successfully.
What's a swing block?
Swing block is when, as opposed to static blocking where you stand in front of the attacker and you jump straight up, a swing block is you turn and run, and you use your arms kind of like a spiker does to get up really high and get over the net. And it was the same thing with swing blocking. A lot of people said, well, women can't do that. Men can do it. Men did it kind of spontaneously, like men do. They just figured out, I've got to get from here to there really quickly. I'm going to run instead of just shuffling. I'm going to run. I'm going to use my arms and jump high. And so men started doing it organically and or ecologically. That's a big word right now in volleyball, ecological dynamics. They just started doing it. And then some really smart people like Carl McGowan started saying, well, women and girls should do it too, and started teaching it. John Stevenson learned from Carl McGowan. St. Mary's started swing blocking. I came to St. Mary's. I came from the men's game where everyone swing blocks, so I continued that. And my first year at St. Mary's, first year at St. Mary's, Mandy Bible, Cowie Salzman, Christina Kirk, Brittany Barker, they were some of the best blockers in the country, actually. We were, as a team, one of the best blockers in the country. And it was largely due to the fact that we were using a technique that other teams weren't using.
Yeah. Same thing with the jump float. So something that didn't exist in the women's game yet, that did already exist in the men's game, was the jump float. And the jump float, I remember in between my junior and senior year of college, Joe Cornell was in the gym, and I was practicing some serving before practice one time. And he comes in, he says, "Hey, can you try this?" And he taught me the jump float. It was pretty easy because it's one of those things that it looks simpler than it is, but once you get the idea of what it's supposed to do, it's just not that complicated. So it was a very natural move. It was something that I was totally game to do because it wasn't happening in any of the women's games. It was a standing float or a jump top. Those were the two options. So to have a jump float now in the mix that nobody had really seen in the women's game was kind of exciting to me. I was like, yes, I'm going to be one of the first people doing this. Let's sneak attack them. So I mastered the jump float all that summer, and then my senior year came out and started jump floating. And I remember against like Long Beach State and Hawaii, and I ended up being an ace leader for the season.
Nationally?
I think nationally. I don't remember if it was nationally, but it was for sure for the program. Yeah. Because there was no way no one was practicing receiving a jump float from a woman. Yeah. So it was like it was exciting at the time. But that's another example of something that men do that was already in their game that hadn't been introduced to our game yet.
So what's the difficulty of the jump float? Like, explain the difference. You said there was two sets. There was just a regular standing float.
Yeah, there's
right?
a standing.
And you said a jump top
and a jump top spin.
Okay.
Yeah, which has a lot more speed on it.
Okay.
But knowing what I know now about passing, being a libero on the national team, I can say that of the serving options, the jump top spin is the easiest to pass.
Okay.
Because it's already got some trajectory and some velocity on it that all you have to do is line up with it and let it hit you.
And it's not going to float.
And it's not going to float.
Once it starts going, you know where it's going to end up.
It's going, yeah.
It's just going to get there fast.
You just got to get there fast enough, exactly, and sit underneath it. But the float, even a standing float can be pretty gnarly. But to have the float happen from above the net coming down with some speed on it, because you're getting some momentum into your serve, that adds a whole different dynamic to passing. And the ball is coming at you kind of this way, or it'll start this way and then kind of dive over here. It's a wicked serve to try to receive.
Now, how does that happen? You hit the needle. I remember like being taught you try to hit the needle. Is that right?
I remember some people used to talk about that.
Yeah, they used to say just try to hit the needle and hit it flat and watch.
That's funny. That's a really old school thing.
Is it? Yeah.
My coaches, when I was in high school in the 80s, said, point the valve stem, right?
Yeah, valve stem. Yeah.
Away from you, because that's the heaviest part of the ball. Don't know if that's true or not, but sounds like it might be. And then it will kind of make it drop or put it on the bottom of the ball. I don't know. When I serve still, if I take time, I find the valve stem and I put it out away from me. I have no idea if it has any effect. I don't think it has any effect.
It's so funny that you say that because John taught us to, when we were actually, may not have been John, it might have been my high school coach, that she said you want to establish a serving routine so that when you go back to serve, because it's such a mental thing, that when you go back there, you only want to be thinking about serving and not being in your head about errors and all this other stuff and noise, background noise and heckling and all that. So she told me to put the bottom of the valve on my middle finger and present it, and that's my routine. And I've done it every year since I've ever played. And I don't know if it's because, I don't know if she started that because it was a mental thing or if it's because the ball's the heaviest on the bottom here.
Yeah, right.
I have no idea.
Interesting. So yes, very old school, right?
Yeah,
Very
old school for sure.
But that just the jump float coming in, hard to see just speed, and it's moving.
Yeah.
Gosh. So so as a libero passing it, what do you do? Technically, what do you do when somebody's good jump floating? What are the keys?
You got to track it immediately. The faster you start tracking the ball from their hand in your eye, the earlier you're going to be able to get there. And then the second thing is you have to be willing to adjust your feet. I see a lot of young players now that they want to go from A to B and be perfect, and this to this and stop, and that's it. But with a float, because it's moving, you have to be willing to adjust your position to get into a good relationship with the ball so that you can pass it. If you get stuck in one spot and the ball moves a little bit and you're in the wrong relationship with it, it's going to ricochet off of you. So you have to kind of navigate your body and navigate your angles and your feet to get it in the right spot in order to get it. But a lot of people aren't willing or used to training that kind of footwork and that kind of movement to get around it and get in the right relationship with it.
I see. Do you deal with that in passing and with your girls? How do you teach it?
Yeah, very similar. You have to be good at moving your feet to get in the best position possible and be balanced, ideally, and then know how to make really small adjustments quickly. And so we teach our players, get your feet there, be good at using your feet to be as balanced as you can. Then you need to make adjustments with your body and your platform to be able to pass the ball. And so if you watch...
feet first? Feet first.
Addie talked about tracking with your eyes. While you're tracking with your eyes, you're tracking with your feet and your platform also. They're kind of, you've got to start lining up your platform early, and you've got to get your feet there and be as balanced as you can. And then you've got to learn how to make little adjustments. So if you'd watch Addie pass a ball, for example, that's coming at her and starts to move, she would do some things like maybe get her body out of the way and put her platform out here because it's high and she doesn't want to get stuck in this position. So she'd get her arms out there maybe or something like that. Addie learned a very different kind of technique with Toshi Yoshida than I learned from Carl McGowan and from others. But it's basically, you've got to use your feet and you've got to learn how to make adjustments because the ball's going to move. A good floater is going to move, and you have to figure out how to adjust to it.
Yeah. 100%. And if the difference in learning what your angles are, for me, a lot of my control is in your shoulders, tilting your shoulders. So that's what kind of starts the angle creation. And the difference, with jump floating, particularly because it is so difficult to navigate those, the difference in moving your shoulders just a tiny bit creates 15 feet difference in the ball. So if I'm pointing my shoulders here and the ball goes there, if I just do this, that's 15 feet over there. So you're either passing it nails or you're turning your setter into a track star. But all the control is right here, and it's very subtle, and there's a lot of feel that's involved. But that's where the angles are created, and you have to start making those angles as you're tracking it and getting into position with it. So it's very fluid. It's very one motion. It's not, stop and go and then do this and then think about, 35 degrees here. Like it's a feeling, and the longer you do it, and the harder you push, it's kind of like learning to drive a stick before you drive an automatic. Like do the hard stuff first, and then all the easy serves start to become like super easy. So I like to push harder and make it too hard, and then back off from there. So if you're making errors, oh well, navigate it, figure out how can I get my platform out faster, how can I steer earlier, how can I track it faster, and then kind of back off from there. Everything else gets easier.
Would you say, Addie, that serve receive passing's the most difficult skill to master?
Arguably, yes. I think I was never a setter.
You
So
could have been.
I think that I worked on it. I think knowing what I know about the game now, if I had my career to do over again, 100% I would go be a setter. I would attack. I would mess with the opponent. I would mess with the block. I would be a setter in a second. But I think passing probably the most difficult to teach because it requires so much feel. But setting probably is right up in there because your hands are independent and your body doesn't want to do independent things. Whereas this, with your platform, your hands they're connected, so everything's kind of there together. Where setting is kind of hard. But yeah, I would say passing is very difficult to teach that feel. There's some things that are easy to teach about passing, and things that are very difficult to teach about passing.
I think it's a really tough skill to master. The national team players are always, I need more passing reps, and the best passers in the world are shanking balls and getting aced, even though they're really good. Anyway, it's a hard skill.
Okay, so it's necessary because it's absolutely necessary, because if you're not a good passing team, you're out of system half the time, and then you're really going to have to be good offensively playing out of system. But if you can work on passing more and master that passing, you're going to be in system more often. You're creating more opportunities for your team to win.
So if I'm a young player, let's just say I'm a young player listening, and would you say the number one thing you need to get good at is passing? Is that like the
first?
Serving first? Okay,
you can't get it over the net.
Okay, so what gets you on the court? So what gets you on the court?
For me, ball control.
I think ball control is really important. But if you're big and you can spike and get kills, you're going to play. You're going to play. It doesn't matter where. Okay. You don't even have to have ball control. If you can hit the ball hard and score points, you're going to play. But Addie was fortunate to have John and other coaches who taught her how to be a volleyball player. So I would say the most important thing that young players need to learn is how to play volleyball. And part of that is learning how to read volleyball and how to anticipate, and just, reading the game is really important, and being a good all-around player like Addie was. That opened a lot of doors for her. So I would say to any young volleyball player, if you want to get really good, play a lot of volleyball. Play beach doubles, play indoor doubles, play indoor sixes, play triples, play fours, play short court, play long court, narrow court, play volleyball as much as you can.
Wow.
Just play. And if you're a learner like Addie is, she clearly is a really good learner. To go from being a middle to being a libero, you have to be a really good learner. If a young person can figure out how to learn things and get better, they can make a ton of progress on their own without a coach necessarily being by their side. If they just play and figure things out, they learn, like, that didn't work, I'm going to try something different. Oh, that worked, I'm going to do that again, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I would have young players also be more willing to be malleable in your positions, because if you start to position train and pigeonhole yourself into one position, I'm only this, I'm only good at this, then if a coach sees potential in you in another position and they want you to switch positions, and the player kind of hesitates and goes, "Ooh, that's not my favorite position. I don't want to play that." It can really kind of hinder what growth you have, and your options as a Misty May was an example of that. We played on the junior national team together, and she was probably the best outside hitter. She was a year younger than us, playing as we were playing as juniors, and she was a sophomore. And she was the best outside hitter at, however tall she is, 5'7", 5'8", maybe 5'9". I don't give her that, but she was a really good jumper. And she was the best outside hitter at the time. And she made the junior national team as a year younger than us. And then she committed to Long Beach State, and Brian turned her into a setter. And the whole country was like, what? And then she went on, to become Misty May. that we know today. But she wouldn't have been able to do that if she told Brian, no, I'm an outside.
Yeah.
How many 5'8", 5'9" outside hitters are there?
There's a few that can jump. If you're physical.
D1, but how many? Not many?
No.
Yeah.
Not a lot. Not at a really high level. No.
Yeah.
There really is something about being tall and reaching high and being able to do that. But if your skill is really good, we've had St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a mid-major. WCC is a mid-major conference. We don't get the first pick in recruiting. We don't get the 6'3" outside hitter who can pass. They're going to other schools. So we take the 5'10". So an example, for example, when I got to St. Mary's, there was a young woman there named Cowie Salzman. She was a senior when I got to St. Mary's, and she's 5'10"-ish, I think. She was awesome because she was a really good volleyball player. She knew how to pass. She knew how to dig. She worked really hard. She knew how to win, and she was amazing. And she could play against, people taller than her and beat them because she knew how to play the game really well. And so she was a good all-around volleyball player.
Yeah, speed can win, game IQ can win, and just that grit that you refuse to lose to her. She is not going to block me today.
Yeah.
I saw, I don't know if you remember the name of that girl that played for LMU. She was a smaller girl from Mexico, maybe, a few years back. And I watched LMU play at Stanford in a regional championship. And Marette Lutz, she was 6'8", playing at Stanford on the right side. And you got 6'8" going up against, she was probably 5'5", maybe. I'll give her 5'5". And she was just in the air and swinging before Marette could even get up in the air. So if you're quick and if you're just unwilling to go down and have that kind of fight and that knowledge of how to do it and how to win, hit the hands, hit other things, LMU almost won that match.
That's fun to watch a player like that, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's really fun to watch
for
a player.
Sure.
So you mentioned to go out, play as much volleyball as you can, right? And that's how you gain IQ. What are the things that young players can do to increase the IQ, like in a technical sense? So if I'm out there playing, let's just say I'm a junkie, and I'm get out there and I'm playing maybe with some older people. What are some things that I would be working on or looking to do to increase my IQ?
I think the first thing that people need to understand is, what does volleyball IQ mean? We talk about, this person has a high volleyball IQ. I think what that means is that they are able to see the game well, read what's happening, and anticipate well. That's the first part of volleyball IQ, and that comes with playing a lot. And you said playing with adults, that's a great thing to do. Play with people older than you because they're crafty, and you got to figure them out because they can't move as well. They have to be crafty, right? You play with some older people, and they maybe aren't as quick, so they figure out how to do things. So I think playing a lot, playing with older people is good, or just playing with people who are good as much as you can. And then I think the other part of volleyball IQ is between plays, thinking about what you're going to do to beat that team across the net. Make adjustments, come up with a plan. I think that's volleyball IQ also, like looking over there and saying, for example, as a setter, you're talking about if you could go back and be a setter, which you will in your next life. You're going to be a setter. And so if Addie were a setter, she'd look over and say, I'm setting behind me because this blocker is little, for example. That's volleyball IQ. There's a mismatch. I'm going to take advantage of it.
So from a setter's perspective, that would be find the mismatch.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
I'm going to not have my middle run a front one. I'm going to have her run what we call a 31 or a gap or a 3, because this middle's slow, and I'm going to make her have to move. That's another part of volleyball IQ, thinking about what can I do to beat this team? And then I think a big part of it is just the ability to read in the middle of a play and understand what's about to happen and anticipate that action.
Yeah, I think that really kind of only comes with playing in a lot of matches and playing against teams that are better than you, playing against teams that are worse than you, and figuring out like what really good players look like and what really bad players look like, and what are the tendencies. A lot of good teams, a lot of good players will lose to a team that's not as skilled as them, because they're expecting this, And what they got was something funky or something a little bit that kind of rocked their boat a little bit. And that team then goes into a confidence spiral and can lose very quickly when they're not necessarily the lesser athlete. They're just the lesser team. They didn't figure it out in time.
I see. Speaking of, so I'm glad you actually brought up teams, because I had mentioned earlier, we were talking about the 2009 team for you was easy. That's kind of an easy one to go back. You've seen a lot of teams, and you've been around now these, Olympic champions. You've had your conference champions. Can you tell us a little bit about some commonalities that you see in these successful teams, and maybe how how have you built these teams or helped build these teams? What are the personality traits? Just give us a little insight on these ultra successful teams.
That 2009 team was special. One of the things that was special about that team and that made them so remarkable is at the end of the season, we lost one conference match to San Diego. We won all of our other matches, and we led the conference in every statistical category. So San Diego was really dominant this last year, and I don't think they led the conference in every statistical category. That was pretty remarkable that that team did that. Every single category, service aces, kills per set, hitting percentage, blocks per set, digs per set, we led in every category. And so you talk about what is the makeup of a team like that. It's, I think that it is having a diverse group of people that have different strengths and harnessing those different strengths. So we had a middle on that team named Shannon Lowell, and Shannon Lowell was the type of player who won at the beginning of practice. If the net wasn't perfect, she wasn't happy. And she would go over and adjust the net because she wanted it to be so. And now she's a surgeon. And she's a surgeon.
Makes sense.
So she's that type of person. And then the other middle was Megan Burton. And Megan Burton had a different mentality. And she was able to, lead and figure out a way to be an amazing blocker, for example. A good attacker, an amazing blocker. We had a libero named Alita Fisher, who was a tennis champion in the state of Washington in high school and played volleyball really well. So she had some things about how she viewed the game that I think were unique. Megan York, Lauren Jekyll, Kapua Kamana'o, we had all these players that have different strengths, and we were able to take all of their strengths and achieve this kind of synergy with all of them. Because synergy is taking all of these different strengths and making something that's greater than the sum of the parts, right?
Right.
And so we were able to do that with that team. Lauren Jekyll was she was a very good attacker, for example. This player, Lauren Jekyll, she was not, forgive me, Lauren, she was not a fantastic volleyball player like Addie. Like, Addie could go play doubles and be really good because she can do everything. Lauren was really good at hitting a fast set, and she got to be a pretty good blocker. But that's what she did. And we learned how to take advantage of that skill that she had and help our team win. We had an outside hitter named Megan York, who is one outside hitter like the one we were talking about. 5'9", maybe. Really crafty, had a bunch of shots, could pass really well, and was determined to win. So, you look at the 2008 gold medal team, the men's team there, a very diverse group in terms of skill set, mentality, personality, but they figured out how to use their strengths and put their differences aside and use all their strengths to come together and be an amazing team together. And so I don't know if that answers your question, Josh, but a commonality between all these great teams, I think, is, all the stuff that you would expect, like drive and hard work and sacrifice and being a good teammate and all those other good things. But I think those great teams that achieve something really special are able to take all their strengths that are different and make them complement each other so that this team is really a team. and not a bunch of individuals. And so I've seen that, in lots of different circumstances. Our women's national team that won a gold medal in Tokyo had that. They figured out how to, and even the team in Rio 4 years before, they had that also. It just didn't work out for them, but they were able to harness all their strengths and be a team.
I think that could be some more good advice for young players is while you're on the quest of bettering your skills, like if you could do the work, the inner work that it requires to be the kind of kid that can help synergize a team, Ben, that's pretty valuable. And if you can be on a team that synergizes like that, you're going to stand out. Coaches are going to come watch you. They want to come watch that kind of passion. They want to come watch that kind of interaction between people. And that's what they're looking for in college too, versus, some kid that's really phenomenal on the court that can get kills. She might get, some place in life. But if she's a brat, or if she's hard to work with, or she isn't coachable, or there's something about her that just isn't quite, she doesn't sync with other people, that I think can be a big deterrent for recruiters.
So you said something interesting about putting aside your differences in there, in that being a kind of a common point between these great teams. Have you seen the opposite of that, to where you have these talented teams that can't put their differences aside and they manifest on the court? Is that a
Sure.
thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. People who are, I don't know, I think basically people who it's more about them than about the team. That's a problem. That's going to make it very difficult if it's more about you as an individual than about the team. People who let conflict turn into something worse. That's really what's the word I'm looking for? If you don't address conflict, it will turn into contention. Contention can tear you apart. Conflict, if it's addressed, is fine. In fact, conflict is very normal. It happens all the time. It's just part of life. If you learn how to address it, communicate it, talk about it, and deal with it well, then you'll be just fine. But if you don't, or you make it very personal, or you're unwilling to forgive, or unwilling to accept, or unwilling to step back sometimes and say, you know what, I'm not going to be the leader in this moment. I'm going to let him or her lead, and I'm going to be a really good follower right now. So I think being able to deal with conflict so it doesn't turn into contention is a very hard thing to do. But when teams are able to do that, it's really good for them. And if you can't, it can easily tear your team apart.
Have you had a season where maybe you started with some contention more than conflict, and were able to resolve that and work through that and improve and see the noticeable improvement on the court as the season went on?
Yeah, I have. But I think more I've seen teams start out really strong, and then conflict that's not addressed or selfish behavior manifests itself after a couple months or after 6 weeks, when things start getting a little harder because you're in conference or because people are getting tired and you're in school. And then, I've seen more of that, where a team that had a lot of promise didn't achieve their potential largely because I wasn't good about seeing these things and addressing that conflict, or getting my team to address those conflicts, or individuals on the team just, being selfish or unwilling to forgive, or unwilling to work with someone, or unwilling to share the spotlight, unwilling to let someone else be successful and enjoy their success and support them in it, even though it looks like it's taking away from me. And, the perfect example of that is this person maybe now is getting playing time ahead of me. Can I find a way to support that teammate of mine and encourage her and be her biggest cheerleader while at the same time pushing myself to win that spot back. You want both of those. You want the player who refuses to just sit back and let that person take their spot, but who also can support that teammate. That's a hard thing to do. It's not a natural human thing to do.
Not at all.
The opposite is more natural and easy, and that is I kind of despise her or,
be
feel like it's
passive-aggressive,
unfair,
maybe, yeah.
whatever. Yeah, be passive aggressive, and those things tear teams apart.
As a coach, how do you navigate that at St. Mary's for you specifically? Do you pull the player into your office and say, hey, this is arising in our gym, I don't like this, or I need to help you do this? What do you tell those kids? How do you handle that?
I think you handle it on the front end. I think I'm getting better at that. I don't think I've always been really good at that, but I think I'm getting better at it. I think you handle it on the front end first. In other words, you talk to your team before the season even starts as soon as you can about what does it mean to be a good teammate? What does that mean? Mia Hamm has a quote that we use a lot, and I've kind of tweaked it for volleyball, but her quote is something like, a great teammate is someone who goes for the ball that everyone thinks is going to go out of bounds, and she gets it. That's what a great teammate is. And so for volleyball, we say a great teammate is the one who goes for a ball that everyone thinks is going to hit the ground. She goes for it, and she gets it. And that's a really nuts and bolts definition of being a great teammate. It's someone who is willing to bust their butt to help the team win and won't give up. So anyway, we talk about stuff like that. What does it mean to be a good teammate? And we talk very intentionally about I'll have them sit and think and say, I want you to imagine that you're in the middle of season, you're in a big match, and I sub you out for someone. I want you to think about how you're going to respond in that situation when it occurs, if or when it occurs, and have them talk about it and think about it. What's the right response? The right response is, even though I may not like it, I'm going to be supportive of that teammate who's going in for me, and I'm going to go to the bench, and my new role is to be the most enthusiastic, most energetic cheerleader on the sideline. That's my role. Even if I'm mad at the coach, which it's okay to be mad at the coach or to be frustrated or angry or whatever, I'm not going to let any of that show. I'm going to go be the best cheerleader, and then I'm going to go home, and if I need to talk to the coach after the match, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go home and say, how can I win that position back? But when that moment happens, I'm going to accept my new role and play it really well.
So you can kind of use, it sounds like you're saying, you can kind of use role play in your own visualizations or imagery to imagine yourself going through that situation so that you can prepare yourself for the best reaction.
I think so. I think that's really important. I think, preparing yourself, doing some visualization kind of sorts, right?
I love visualization.
Visualization's great for any player to visualize yourself doing things and doing them well and making adjustments in a match, think about that. But also the visualization for the intangible stuff, like visualize yourself being a good leader, visualize yourself confronting some adversity and picture yourself confronting that adversity, responding to it well, and rising above it and doing that.
I love that. I love that so much. That's how I teach players to get out of errors. When they make an error, the next thing you think about, most players try to diagnose what they did wrong, and they go down the list of all the things they did wrong. Well, of course you did a lot of stuff wrong, but can you visualize yourself doing it the way that you remember how to do it? And that snaps you back instantly. So visualization, I'm a huge fan of visualization.
That's awesome. Yeah.
For both purposes.
So you're saying, so understand the mistake you made, go back and visualize you in that same exact scenario, but doing it the correct way.
Yeah. Part of visualization, I think, is visualizing physical things, is seeing yourself do it well and being really trying to make it as real as possible in your mind. That's part of it. It's hard to do in volleyball because volleyball is a very random game. It's much easier for a slalom skier to visualize what they're about to do because they know the course, they know exactly what they need to do. And so you'll see them, right, when they're in the starting gate, you'll see them just rehearsing in their mind exactly how they're going to run that course. a gymnast can visualize their routine because it's a routine. No one's going to come out and guard them, and no one's going to hit a ball at them.
That would be really fun to watch, though.
That would be interesting, right?
That'd be awesome.
There are a lot of things I think that would be really cool. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, throw some
Defensive
random
golf.
element in there. Yes, exactly.
Let's hit the ball away.
Exactly. So a gymnast can visualize their routine exactly how they have rehearsed it. This is exactly how I'm going to do it. A volleyball player can't do that except for the serve. That's the only thing you can visualize and recreate exactly how you want because you control it from beginning to end. Other than that, everything's random. And so you have to visualize yourself making adjustments. You have to visualize, here I am in my serve receive position, and this ball's coming, and then it floats left. How am I going to respond to that? I visualize myself responding to that well. And then what I was referring to is visualizing and kind of being real about intangible stuff that will happen in the future, inevitably. Adversity, being pulled out of a game, playing poorly. How are you going to respond as a teammate? How are you going to respond as a leader? How are you going to respond as, you know, an athlete on the court when those things happen? So I think that's how I try to deal with it. Is one of the ways is to front load it, right, before it happens, and talk about how are you going to be a good teammate when you're pulled out of the game. And then reality hits, and it may or may not happen because reality's hard when you do get pulled out, the emotions and the situation, the circumstances. But I think it's helpful for an athlete to visualize adversity and visualize themselves handling it well and rising above it and moving forward.
I think humanity should practice that.
Yeah.
Like in general.
Right? Yeah, they should.
Do you have a 24-hour rule as far as players contacting you right after, let's just say I got pulled out, I was the starter and I just got pulled out, the game's emotional, it was however it went, right, and ended. Everybody's emotions are heightened, yours, the players,
right.
Everybody, the parents usually of the players, right? And I'm sure you've dealt with the nasty emails or text messages or whatever right after the game, and it's probably a weekly occurrence for somebody like you. But do you have a rule that you set that's like, hey, 24 hours, 12 hours, next morning, and does that, do people respect that, or do you just have an open door policy of like, hey, come see me right after the game?
I don't have a policy like that, but maybe in some kind of more vague terms. For example, I'm not a big believer in after a match that's been rough, that you've lost, where people talking a long time in the locker room. Some of my players might hear this and say, wait, you've done that before, because I probably have. But I think everyone needs to gain some perspective and just absorb what's happened, kind of let it sink in, think about it, watch some video, and then start addressing things. So maybe informally I do, but not formally. I don't have a rule. And so, yeah, I understand that concept, and there are a lot of things that I think I believe about it that I allow to happen, some space there between it when it happens. But if a player wanted to talk to me right after the match, I wouldn't tell him no.
What would be the right way for a player to, say, approach you? Or maybe it's not you, maybe it's another coach, maybe there's a listener out there that is, maybe frustrated, maybe this situation just happened where they went from starter to now on the bench, or reserve role, or lesser playing time. How would you tell a young athlete to deal with that specific? Like, what's the right way to approach a coach? Because a lot of people I know the unspoken is retribution, right? Like,
right.
I've spoke my mind and now the coach isn't going to like me,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do you, if you have that fear, how do you tell an athlete to approach a coach?
That's a great thing to think about. I think that, first of all, the coach needs to have some good reasons for what they're doing. They need to have some good reasons. And that can be hard at times because, I'll tell my team, look, if I think we're going to lose unless something changes, I'm going to make a change. I might not even have a good reason for it. But if I think the ship is sinking and if we don't change something, we're going to sink, then I'll change someone. Here's a great story, if you allow me to tell a story. Athens
Absolutely.
Olympics, Volleyball's the setter for the team. We're playing Greece, and we won the first set, lost the second. I think it was pretty close. Lost the third. It was decent. We're getting crushed in the fourth. We're about to lose. We're down something like 11-19. In international volleyball at that level, you almost can just say, you know what, let's just shake on it, because we're not going to win, because it's really hard to come back from that deficit that late in the game. So we're in that situation in Athens, and Doug Beal, at some point when things started going sideways with the team, he made a sub. He took out arguably the best setter in the world, Volleyball, and he put in a young good setter, Donald Sujo, who was less experienced, had a very different style, and he put him in. And that was a case of Doug saying, the head coach saying, if I don't change something, we're going to lose. So I'm just going to change something. And I think he probably said the thing that will have the biggest impact right now is to change our setter, because the setter is a very impactful position. It's like changing your quarterback, right?
Right.
So he did that, and Donald went in and was the spark plug. And I know Loy didn't like that, but Loy was an amazing teammate at that moment. He did not show any negativity. His body language wasn't negative. I think it may have been the only time in Loy's life he was ever subbed out in an important match.
Wow.
I could say that. We'd have to ask Loy, but he was always the top guy. I mean, he was a very, very good setter. He played in 4 Olympics. He started in Atlanta, and then he was in Sydney, and then Athens, and then Beijing. Arguably the best setter in the world for a long time. He was a fantastic teammate. He was called in later in the match to come in and be a serving sub, which he'd probably never done in his life, because he was always the starting setter. Came in and served, got an ace, served another ball that they passed poorly, scored another point, dug a ball with his hands in middle back, which he'd never played middle back before, because setters don't play middle back on defense. And we ended up winning the match. The team ended up winning. So I'm not answering your question directly, Josh, but I think I would tell a young player that when things don't go right for you, you need to look at yourself first. Even if you think it's unfair, even if your parents and everyone who's in your ear tells you it's unfair, you need to look at yourself first and say, what can I do? What's in my circle of control, my circle of influence that I can do to better my situation? And we human beings don't do that naturally. We want to point fingers and blame because it feels better. It's harder to say, maybe I can do something better. So I think I would tell a young person, you need to learn that early on. Take responsibility for yourself. Even if you think it's totally unfair, just think about what's in my circle of control, because I can't control the coach and what the coach says or does. So I'm going to work harder, prepare better. I'm going to improve the skill that my coach is telling me is not, needs to be better. I'm going to make changes faster, and I'm going to show up the next day. If you don't know, you should go talk to your coach. If you don't know the reasoning behind it, go talk to your coach. A good coach will say, please come talk to me. I'm happy to have you talk.
So maybe ask questions.
Ask questions for sure.
Maybe not be accusatory of
no.
Why are you doing this? Or
well, I think your point about you need to let emotions kind of come down is really important. I think when you're angry and really emotional, it's not a good time to have a conversation with someone who, has a big role in whatever has just happened. I think it's better to just have a little bit of time and find another time to talk. I think a coach needs to be aware of that situation and also take initiative of going to talk to that player too and say, hey, look, I know that was really hard. Let's talk about it. But yeah, I think, we people and these kids that we're talking about need to learn how to look at themselves first and decide what is in my circle of control. What can I control and be really good at that? Because you can't control your coach.
Yes. And you mentioned watch the film too. I think I've watched a lot of film in my life, and it's never as bad or never as good as you thought that it was.
Very true.
As being a coach, I remember just going back and watching some of our games and going, really seemed a lot worse in my head, or, I thought we looked a lot better than, that. When you see it on film, you're like, that was okay. So I think that's probably great advice too.
Yeah.
Is to do that. All right. So you said something interesting about society, players, kind of the pointing the finger outwards instead of inwards when you're talking about like what maybe you could do to improve, right? Or if I get benched and whatnot. And I find that interesting because I would have a tendency to agree emphatically that the culture now is the problem's always out there. When you're recruiting, is that something that you look for? Do you look for personal accountability in recruits? And if you do, how do you go about that process from a recruiting standpoint?
Right.
And do you have any like red flags that you're just like maybe a great player and you're just like, absolutely not?
Yeah, for sure. There are some red flags. So I think evaluating things like that is really important and really difficult. It's easy to look at a player and say, she's a good spiker, she's a good server, she's not so good at this. But is she proactive? How tough is she? Is she a learner? Like, is she going to get better? Is she a great teammate? You can see some stuff, like the teammate stuff maybe is a little bit easier to see because you can observe them on the court and see how they respond when teammates mess up or when she messes up, and how is she on the sideline when she's not in, and things like that. But some of those other things, like is she a learner, and character things are harder to evaluate. So you need to do your homework. You need to talk to coaches who've coached this player, and you need to be able to read between the lines. So if I talk to a coach of a player and the coach says, and I say, how is she as a teammate? And the coach says, she's getting better as a teammate. That means she's got some issues as a teammate. Or how is she? Is she tough? Is she a tough player? And they say something like, she's, and there's a pause there, she's reasonably tough, or she's working on that. That means this coach, because the coach, that club coach, has two people that they need to work with. They need to market their player, for lack of a better word. Their job is to get that player into college and get him a scholarship, because it's really good for their club. Because it just frankly, it makes them more money, because if they can put on their wall, these are where all of our players, on their website, these are where all of our players have gone, more players are going to want to go to their club. And so maybe I shouldn't say makes them more money. It elevates the prestige of their club, and their club is a business. So they need to sell their players, but they also need to make sure that they maintain the trust in the relationships they have with these college coaches. So they're going to be very careful about saying, she's the hardest worker in the gym if she's not, because then she's going to come to me or a college coach, and that coach is going to say, well, I'm not going to listen to that coach again. Next time that coach tells me this player is a hard worker, or anything they tell me, I'm going to, be really skeptical. So they're always balancing those two things. So they're maybe not going to come out. I've had very few club coaches who have said, you don't want this girl. A few have said, you don't want her. She doesn't work hard. You don't want her. And
do you respect that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For sure. I usually have a relationship with that club director, that club coach. And if they're willing to say that, knowing that their job is to try and get these players into college, if I respect that coach and know him well enough, absolutely. Yeah, I'll say. So then you talked about red flags, and yeah, there for sure are red flags. If you see things in a match with a player, like, they're in a timeout and they're not paying attention, or they get subbed out and they have a look on their face of like, why am I getting subbed out? Or they're on the sidelines and I don't know, whatever, they have an interaction with their parents between a game, and you're watching and you think, oh, that's not great. There are little red flags, but you have to kind of take the whole picture into account, and you're looking for all these little things and trying to get a really good picture of who is this person that I'm bringing into my team that I value very highly. And And then, quite honestly, there's a trade-off too. You might look at someone and say, she's got a couple red flags, but she's a game changer for our team. And Marv Dunphy says you can handle 1.5 knuckleheads on your team. You can have 1.5 knuckleheads, and you can probably manage that and be okay, but you can't have 3. You can have Dennis Rodman on your team as long as you've got a Michael Jordan and a Scottie Pippen who can say, that's not how we do it here. And you need to do this, that, and the other. And, you're kind of doing your own thing, but when you're on the court, you have this role and you play it really well. You're a rebounder and a defender, and you're great at that. And don't do anything that's going to derail what we've got going here. And you've got those strong leaders that can keep that player in check, then you're okay. So I think, and sometimes you get burned by that. She's really good. I know she's not great academically, and there's a couple question marks here, but she's really good, and it can burn you.
Like bring her in, and then she
can
burns out.
An individual can destroy a team if they've got a strong enough personality and can recruit enough people on the team to follow her, and she's going to do some things that are not good for the team. An individual can destroy your team for sure.
Kind of turn the locker room against you.
Totally.
A bit,
or just divide, turn people against each other. For sure that can happen. So there are red flags, when someone comes on a visit, we coaches are paying attention to how they interact with their parents, how they interact with us.
What kind of things are you looking for when they interact with their parents? I've heard some stuff about this, so I'm
well,
kind of curious.
I think, that goes both ways. How the player, the child, the child interacts with their parents. Like, is there a lot of eye rolling and, I'm embarrassed by my parents, and that could be a red flag. Like, their maturity maybe isn't, they don't quite have that understanding of how to allow an adult, especially an important adult in their life, to just be themselves and just say, that's just my mom. She's just that way, but I love her and I respect her. And so maybe there's a problem with respect of authority if they're like that. But it goes the other way also, where the parent, maybe how the parent speaks for the child or treats their child, or ask questions that maybe that make you think, I don't think the parent gets it. That might be a red flag. Unfortunately, a coach might say, I think this kid's pretty great, but I don't want to deal with this parent.
Right.
I think a more experienced coach would be able to say, I'm going to have a conversation with this parent right off the bat and say, look, here's what needs to happen. Your daughter's in college now, and you need to give her space, and you need to give me space to be her coach. Your role right now is to be her biggest fan and not to critique her game and not to question what I'm doing. Your role is to be a parent right now. Even if you are and were a volleyball coach, I've been really fortunate to have some parents that are Hall of Fame volleyball coaches. Don Shaw, Patty Dodd, Mike Dodd, and other parents who are just really accomplished coaches and players in their own right. And quite honestly, those parents, they got it because they were coaches. So they understood where the boundaries were, and they were really good about that, even though there were things they probably knew better than I did. And so, we're looking at all those things. And I know Addie, as a former collegiate coach and now a coach of young people, gets that and understands how that needs to be presented and how to communicate, on behalf of that player about who that player is, and teaching the player and their parents about, look, this is how you need to be when you go on this visit, and it's going to be different now. Mr. and Mrs., they're going to college now, and it's a different thing. You're not paying anymore. You're not the paying customer. They're actually giving your daughter a scholarship. And the dynamic is very different now. Of course, the whole world has changed with the transfer portal and NIL. Things are completely different. But there's still a lot of it that's the same. And I think it's an interesting, really important part of recruiting.
So recruiting strategy, you had mentioned earlier that you get you don't get the first pick. Okay, so you don't
Right.
you don't get the first pick because you're I think you described as mid-major,
Yeah,
right?
we're mid-major, yeah.
So ideally, tell me about some of your ideal recruits at certain positions and give me some of that criteria. So if we have a listener out there that's like, hey, I meet that ideal criteria, and then how could that recruit, if they're under the radar, get your attention?
Yeah. There's a young woman we're recruiting now, and I can't talk about her.
No,
Can't
of
use
course.
her name.
No name.
We're recruiting now. I went to watch a game, and I went to watch a different player on that court, and I saw her, and I watched her, and her energy with her teammates, how she interacted with her teammates, her will to be great and to work really hard, that you could tell there was no sense of, I don't want to look stupid. It was just, I'm going to work really hard for. She was the kind of teammate Mia Hamm was talking about. She's the kind of girl that is going to go for a ball that everyone thinks is going to hit the ground, but she's going to go for it. She didn't care what she looks like. Her job is to get that ball up. And then I saw her at a different tournament being a line judge, because, in juniors tournaments, they need to do some officiating. And she was a line judge. And she took that job so seriously, more seriously than some professional line judge. She was totally into it. And so what I learned about her is she knows how to play her role really well. She's dedicated to the team. She came across as a team player who's willing to do whatever she needs to do to help her team be successful. And if her team needs her to be a line judge for this other match, she's going to do it well. And so that's something so we're recruiting that young woman. I'll talk about someone that we've had in the past. I've had.
So you saw high character in that?
Yeah, saw a lot of
everything. That it sounds like that you're looking for the character side of work and everything.
They need to be good.
Yeah,
they have to be good.
Yeah,
they have to have both.
Okay,
they have to be good, and they have to have these intangibles. Ideally, no one's perfect. They're going to have deficiencies in both areas, and you got to decide what you can live with, because we've all got our deficiencies. But you're looking for the whole package. Like, she's skilled, she's athletic, she's a good teammate, she's good academically, she's mature, all these things. And you're just trying to evaluate all of them. And what does she have? What does she have to offer us? So I went to the California Junior College, I think they call it community college, maybe championships several years ago, to watch a couple players from Pierce College or something. And I went to watch, and one of my players who I had said, hey, one of my friends plays for College of the Canyons in Valencia, right? And
my daughter played there last year.
Oh, really? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So College of the Canyons, and I went and watched, and this player said, hey, this is my friend. And so I kind of, saw her, and I watched her play, and all of a sudden I wasn't recruiting this other player that I went to watch anymore. I was recruiting this girl who was friends with one of my players, because she had those qualities. And she came to St. Mary's.
Oh, wow.
And she was a phenomenal person and a phenomenal student athlete. And she wasn't the best player in the gym, but she lived each day like she was living her dream. Every day she walked in the gym, she had an attitude and energy about her like, I am just so happy to be here, and I'll do anything for my team and for my teammates. I'm just loving where I am and what I'm doing, and I'll work hard, and I'll do anything you ask me to do. And she turned out to be a really good player, and she was on a very good team that went to the NCAA tournament, had a great, just a really good season, and she was a big part of that. And she wasn't a starter at the beginning of the season, and that hurt. She didn't like that, but she still played her role really well. And then because of an injury, she got that role. She was prepared for it. She did really well, and we won some matches because she was really good at her role on the team. So, you're asking about how do we, evaluate players, and who's someone I've recruited that's come in and kind of filled that role, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of the question. And
yeah, how do they get a hold of you? Like, if they're under the radar, if I'm a little under the radar, how do I get your attention? Because okay, so you went to see some of these junior college kids.
Yeah.
And the state tournament is one thing where I think that's probably commonplace for recruiters to show up and kind of watch. But if I'm, as you know, a lot of the best players still won't make it to the state tournament, not in California, because I think there's only 8 teams, 4 from the north, 4 from the south. So if I'm on one of those teams that doesn't make it during the season, I'm a JUCO kid, that's probably pretty tough. Or if I'm, an under the radar high school kid, how do I get your attention? What's the proper way to kind of go about that?
You do the traditional channels, email, because that's one of the only things you can do if you're not preparing for your junior year. You can't have a phone conversation with a coach, even if you initiate the phone call. Those rules have changed, and now we can't have contact with anyone who's younger than June 15th after their sophomore year. We can have no correspondence with them. They can send us emails. They can send us mail. They can express their interest, but we cannot have any communication with them. We can't reply to their emails. We can't call them. We can't talk to them on the phone, or we can't talk to them in person. We can't even tell their coach, hey, tell her that I'm interested. We can't do that anymore. We used to be able to do that, and the rules have changed. They're trying to slow down recruiting, which I totally understand. They're trying to make it so that kids are making decisions later in their high school career, because they're probably going to make better decisions if they wait longer. So it's a good idea. And I think it's having some good effect. So they need to email us, and they need to make sure that email is addressed to me and show that they actually know something about St. Mary's by saying, I watched your game. That was a great game against Pepperdine or whatever. And, I thought you guys played great. I'm excited for your match against San Diego. I came to your match against they need to show that they really are interested. If we coaches get any hint that this is a mass email, or that you really don't know who I am, or it comes from a third party, that's not going to impress us as much, unless they're really impressive. So you're talking about someone who's under the radar.
Yeah, maybe under the radar. You said that's really interesting, though, that you said the third-party recruiting services, you're like,
It doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah.
Let me just put it that way. It does not have the same impact on a coach that an email that comes from that player's email address that is clearly addressed to them, that shows they know something about your program.
So that email should come from the player.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. There's no replacement for that.
And there's no replacement for that.
And it's a turnoff if it doesn't come from that player.
If it comes from a parent, or it comes from a coach, or it comes from a recruiting service, it does not have the same impact.
Wow.
It needs to come from the player.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of parents helping. I'm okay with cut and paste the body of your email. I'm realistic about these kids also don't have a ton of time to craft this unique email to each coach. But the opening line needs to get my name right and say something about St. Mary's, and I'm interested in your school, not just, and then at the end it needs to say, good luck this week against, and go Gales. There needs to be something there that tells me this email's for me.
Right.
She wrote it to me. Even though I know the body of it maybe is copy and paste, I'm fine with that. That's okay.
Okay.
But it needs to come from her, and it needs to be to me.
What about highlight film?
Yeah.
And what type of shots, what angles are you looking for that tells the story about the player? What is best version that they could send you? Maybe a quick description.
Yep. Short. It needs to impress the coach.
Short, like a minute, 2 minutes?
2 minutes is fine.
2 minutes is fine.
3 minutes is maybe max. Yeah.
It better be good.
It better be good. You need to catch that coach's attention with the first thing you put on there. So if someone says I'm an outside hitter, and the first thing they put on there is digging, the first thought I'm going to have is she must not be a very good hitter, because she didn't start with that.
Interesting.
And that's a premium skill. If it's a libero, and the first thing she puts on there is, I don't know, serving or setting, I'm going to say she's probably not a great passer. Otherwise, she would have started with serve, receive, passing, which is probably the most important skill for a libero. Digging is also really important, but serve, receive, passing is the thing that every coach needs.
to start off with the main thing that you're good at.
You got to get their attention.
And if not, that's almost a swipe or
because coaches aren't going to watch very long. Even if they're really impressed, they're probably not going to finish the video. They're just going to say, hey, assistants, we need to watch this girl. And if we're allowed to reply, I'm going to reply right away, but we're probably not because they're sending those emails early. But maybe if they're later, if it's later and I see that, I'm going to reply right away and say, hey, I watched your video and I'm really impressed. We're going to come watch you play. When can you come visit campus? Whatever. Right. Let's get on the phone and talk. If I can email them, I can talk on the phone with them. So, that highlight video is important. It has to be in there. If it's not in there, that's a big red flag. Okay. And occasionally I get an email that doesn't have a highlight video. Yeah. And so my first thought is she must not be very good.
Oh, interesting.
Otherwise, she, here's my highlight video. Watch me play. I'm really good.
So your best plays first.
Absolutely.
Right.
Your best play and the most important thing that you do. If you're a middle blocker, it's attacking and blocking. If you're a libero, it's serve, receive, and digging, and then serving. If it's an outside hitter, it's hitting, and then maybe passing, and then maybe blocking, and then serving. If you're an opposite, it's I can hit and block. I can score points for you. So those things need to be in there. And the first plays need to get their attention. It needs to be impressive.
What about music? Any music offend you?
I'll turn it down.
If it's bad, do you just mute it?
Yeah. Okay. Most coaches don't want to listen to your music.
Gotcha.
I think.
Gotcha.
They probably don't want to listen to it. You don't need.
Is raw sound better? Would raw sound be fine?
I'm going to turn that off too.
You're going to turn that off too? Okay.
I'm probably not going to listen to anything. I'm just going to focus on that. And you need to be careful, mom or dad who's doing the video, what you're saying during the play. Usually it's not a problem, but, just you got to remember that someone's going to be listening to it. Scan it first. Yeah, that rarely happens. You rarely get something where someone says something, but you just got to know that people are going to listen. But
it's hilarious and entertain us.
Right. Yes, right.
If it's hilarious,
that's great. Okay, so that's the video portion, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if I'm under the radar, I'm essentially going to send you an email. I'm going to send you video, a highlight video in that email with the thing that I do really good is going to be on there. I'm going to tell you that I'm interested in your college specifically.
Yeah.
And I'm going to mention something that's specific to your college and go Gales at the end. And the body of the email can talk about what's the good, just is there so much me, or is it check this out? Is it something quick?
You need to say that you're a good volleyball player. A lot of kids talk about, I'm a hard worker, and that's important. I'm a great teammate. That's important. I want to hear, I can pass nails. And
confidence.
I am really, I'm a good attacker. And these are my stats. That needs to be there.
What if you get a reference letter from somebody like Addie, let's just say, or somebody that does that go? Do you guys look at that, or
definitely?
Does that
But it needs to happen second. I mean, if Addie comes to me and says, because I know Addie and have so much respect for her, if she comes to me and says, you got to watch this player.
Right.
I'm going to watch that player. Right. Absolutely. And even if that player hasn't reached out to me, I'm going to go do that. But in general, if a coach is calling or emailing me and I don't know that coach, I want to hear from the player first. Because what I'm going to tell the coach is, really, she's interested in me? She hasn't emailed me. If she's interested in me, why are you telling me? Because if she's interested, she knows that I have an email address and I want to hear from her. But after that email, yes, it's very good that the coach is saying, hey, I want to talk to you about this player. You really need to come watch this player. Even if I don't know that coach, that's going to definitely help.
Okay.
That the coach is on board with, I really like this player and you need to come watch her.
Awesome. Addie, do you have anything to add to that?
To the recruiting?
Yeah, recruiting side.
Not really. I think that's, he's the guy that's doing it right now. I haven't, been in a position to recruit. I'm finally on the flip side of it now. So it's been actually helpful to see how kids and how families think that they get recruited versus how they're actually getting recruited. Like this whole social media thing. I think some schools might really look at those Instagram pages as little highlight clips and stuff, but I don't think that's how they're shopping. I don't think that they go to Instagram and go, I'm going to look for a volleyball player today.
Is that what you do? Is that you ever?
I don't have Instagram.
Okay.
So no.
There you go.
So you don't. Yeah.
No.
So, okay.
Not interested in what's on their social media. if they share something with me and say, like, they might have a video clip that they put on Instagram and say, here's a video clip of me, then yeah, I'll watch it.
Okay.
But I'm not going to go search on Instagram.
Do you think some colleges do, though? Like maybe some colleges that don't have the budget to recruit, or some like D3s or some NAIAs like that are doing that? Because I do know a lot of recruiting agents that advocate for student athletes that will say, build an Instagram profile, put some good clips on it because it's easy to see. And I've looked at it, a few of them, and they are easy to watch. Like once I find the player, once they've been brought to my attention, it is very easy to watch.
Sure.
But I can see how a higher level college coach would find that almost, maybe not irritating, but like unprofessional, or like not the right way to do
Yeah.
it.
I think it's not, I don't think a college coach is going to go try to discover people on Instagram. Let me
Correct.
put it that way.
Okay.
If someone sends me an email and I think I can get more information about her on social media, then I've done that before. Mostly, though, it's to find out what kind of a person is this. So I've had someone email me, I've had players, email me, and I just think I want to know who this person is, and I've gone on their social media through someone else, one of my assistants or something. Or actually, I don't need to have a Twitter account, for example, or Instagram to go and see some things on their account, right? So I've just gone and Googled that person.
Mhm.
And there have been a couple cases where I've looked what's on their social media and said, I don't want anything to do with that. That's not the kind of person that I want to recruit. So I have done that, but I don't think most college coaches are going to go try to search for someone on social media. After they've had contact, they might go look,
Check it.
and check it some more. And for sure, there are other coaches that use social media way more than I do because I don't use it. So, anyone who uses it at all is using it more than I do. But so the moral of the story there, right, is be careful about what you put on there.
Yeah.
We've told that to kids for 10 years now or 15 years. That when you go get a job, if someone really wants to suss you out, they're going to go check out your history. And if you've got stuff on there that's kind of sketchy, they're going to say, if they were willing to put that on social media, then there's probably a lot more they're not putting on there that I don't want in my business or on my team.
That's good. That's good to know. So clean up your social media, right?
Yeah.
That's a good one. So, all right. So as we finish up here, I wanted to open it up to you and maybe talk about any projects that you have going. How can our audience support you?
We just did a trip to Canada. It was awesome. We had a great, it was our foreign trip. We went to Canada, and it turned out to be really, really good. It was unconventional because most teams go to Europe or they go to South America. They go maybe to Asia or something like that. And we went to Canada, and I think it was a fabulous trip. And part of the reason we went to Canada is because it was more affordable. But it turned out that it was really good for us in volleyball and just having fun, because Vancouver, British Columbia is an amazing place. And their women's national team trains there. And we got to play against their next gen team, which is kind of their B team. Awesome for us. It was really good. So we got a lot of support for that. We're able to do that. Something that our team's involved in that I'm really proud of is our team has created an organization on our campus called LIGHT, L-I-G-H-T. And the GHT stands for Gales Against Human Trafficking. And we've done a lot to educate ourselves about human trafficking, to support organizations that are fighting human trafficking, and to, on our campus, make other people aware of the realities of human trafficking. And so it's been really good for our team. The women on our team are passionate about it. They know that it's a real thing and that they can make a small difference. And so I would say in terms of support for that, it wouldn't be for us. What we're trying to do is highlight organizations that are doing really good work and support those organizations. We support those organizations. We do fundraisers. We have them speak. We did a great event with a bunch of student athletes on our campus where we introduced them to these organizations and introduced them kind of to the realities of human trafficking. So, for example, in the East Bay, there's an organization called Love Never Fails, and they're in the trenches in Oakland, in Hayward, in Castro Valley, in San Francisco, where they are rescuing people who are involved in sex trafficking. They're doing rehabilitation for them. They have houses for them. They're out on the streets, with these mostly young people who are very much on the periphery of society, very vulnerable, from very, disadvantaged backgrounds. And they're, doing from simple as giving them hygiene kits to help keep them healthy, to try to get them off the streets and rehabilitate them and get them in a better environment. There's an organization called Sudara that we've worked with, and they have a very different approach. They are actually in India providing jobs for women in India where sex trafficking and prostitution is very prevalent because there are a lot of families that are in very desperate and dire financial situations. And so one of the ways to get out of that actually is to go find a job somewhere. And a lot of times that job is in prostitution and it's trafficking. The people who are handling those women and girls, and sometimes boys and men, but mostly women and girls, they own them and they control them, and they're theirs. They think that person is their property. So this organization, Sudara, provides jobs for women and girls in India, well-paying jobs, making this beautiful clothing that people can buy, and it keeps them out of that sex trade. So we're supporting these organizations that are in the trenches doing this really good work. So if someone would want to support us in that way, they should find an organization like Love Never Fails or Sudara or Operation Underground Railroad or International Justice Mission or Olive Crest in Santa Barbara or any of these many organizations. Tim Tebow has an organization that is involved in that in a way, keeping kids out of sex trafficking. Support those groups.
So can they find links on your guys's on the site? Is that
yes?
Okay.
Yeah, they can. We have a web page.
Okay, what is it?
That's a great question.
I'll tell you what. I'll get it from you after the show.
In my head.
Yeah, we'll make sure and put it on there.
But yes, we have links to all of those organizations on that web page. But I think anyone can just go and search out those organizations that I named, or just look up human trafficking and find organizations there are so many organizations that are doing things to fight it. Zoe International is over in Asia, and they're doing a lot of good work there to fight human trafficking. There's a group called It's a Penalty, and they go to major sporting events where prostitution and human trafficking occurs at a very high level, whether it's the Super Bowl or the World Cup or whatever. All these people come into town, and sadly, people go there to market women and girls mostly, sometimes boys also, to people who want to buy them and take advantage of them. And this organization has gotten some really high-level athletes like Aaron Rodgers and Usain Bolt to endorse them and speak out and speak up and say, look, this stuff happens and you may not see it, but it's real and we need to fight it. And so they'll have these campaigns where their presence is really strong around this event, saying, keep an eye out for human trafficking and do not do anything that might support these people or further whatever their malevolent ways, whatever they're trying to do. We got to try and fight back against this. And some of it is just being aware and knowing that, wow, I didn't know that the Super Bowl was a human trafficking event also, that on the side all this horrible stuff is happening. I just thought it was a sporting event. And so just being aware of that There's a movie out right now called Sound of Freedom. I recommend people go see that movie without any bias about politics or anything else. Just go watch it because it's real. There are conspiracy theories out there that are hurtful because here's a real problem we have in society. And when people start talking about weird things about this person, eats babies and this person does that and whatever, it hurts the real cause of helping these people. So it's a reality. It does happen. It's unbelievably prevalent, especially with the internet. COVID made human trafficking even worse because kids were taken out of school where they might have been protected from people who were abusing them. Other people were at home with nothing to do, so they started delving into materials that they should have, not be into, especially anything that involves a minor. So it's a big problem. Unfortunately, it's gotten worse, and we need more people to be aware of it, and we need more people who are willing to do something about it. And really, it's hard to do anything about it individually as an individual. What you need to do is support an organization that's in the trenches, set up to fight it. Give them money, send them $100 and say, I appreciate what you're doing, and do that once a year. Or send $25 to 4 different organizations. Or if you have the means, send them $500 and say, I support what you're doing, and I want to do something to fight this.
Amen.
That's fantastic.
Amen.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge problem. And we were made aware of that somewhere around 2020, 2019, 2020. Just eyes open. Operation Underground Railroad. So we've, supported them for the last, since 2020. So
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good ones out there. Well, thank you so much, Rob. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on the show and
Thank you for having me. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Very honored to be able to do it with you guys.
Yeah.
For being our first volleyball guest.
Awesome.
Lots of great insight.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of great insight. Lots of great insight for recruitings and technical stuff. And so we'll put that out. We'll put that out here shortly. So anyway, thank you so much, and we'll see you. Hopefully, see you again.
Good.
Go Gales.
Thank you. Go Gales.